MashaAllah. It's alhamdulillah, I remember Shk Hamza. I didn't know him at the time. It was 1995. I'm sitting in Al Rahma Mosque, and there was somebody doing a khutbah, and it wasn't the usual imam at the time. And this khutbah was in Arabic, and I was young. I was like, this is taking too long. And then the imam, the khatib, then spoke in English, and his English was impeccable. And I was like, my word, there's no accent in the English, and the Arabic accent that creeps in. That wasn't there. And I was like, wow, who is this? So I looked, and alhamdulillah, with Shk Hamza Yusuf, and mashallah, a lot of the most influential talks that impacted traditional Islam in the mid-90s happened around about then. Just briefly before we move on, how would you say that Shk Hamza influenced yourselves in that regards?
SubhanAllah, Shk Hamza Yusuf, may Allah raise him. He's pivotal to so much of what's going on. Back then, it was known because we were all there at that time, but like a generation's now come who don't realize how central he was. So early 90s, before Shk Hamza Yusuf was the big like fad, or the big movement from America, was Imam Siraj wal Hajj. And he was amazing in terms of da'wah, in terms of reaching out to the youth. He was phenomenal. He was amazing. It was like a breath of fresh air coming in, where you can actually hear somebody understanding. He's got like, it's all that the romantic nature of the American accent there as well, and he was such a funny entertainer, but he's a man of deen. But he's the one who pointed us essentially Sheikh Ibrahim al-Siyaf and says, he said, bring Shk Hamza Yusuf. Well, at that point, it was only about, I think it was like less than 10 years from when he'd finished his own studying. It was quite soon after he himself. So now he comes, and he's very much not just about the general data, which is very much about people focusing upon getting sound, correct knowledge. So a lot of what you see now, a lot of the teachers, a lot of the shuyukh and so on, he's the one who's pushed them down the path. Even for myself personally, we had a course here in Liverpool. That was, I think it was 94 or 95. I forget which year it was.
95,
right? And so we had a month. And one thing for those who are listening to remember, like now Shk Hamza Yusuf, he's an international personality. Back then, nobody knew him. Like, we'd be going around with him or touring the country, and there'd only be like 5 or 10 people turning up there. So we had like a month with him, nobody else around. And it was times when we were discussing a lot of issues in detail with him, clarifying issues, and he changed a lot. Like, he changed a lot of our incorrect understandings and put us on a path. For myself, for example, at that time, I really wanted to go away and study that time. Allah didn't decree for that not to happen until another 10, 15 years later. But I asked him, I want to go and study. He just simply said, save up 6 months worth of money, go to Syria. I'd say, so just go to Syria. So a lot of the teachers who are central to a lot of what's going on, they took their inspiration from Shk Hamza Yusuf, mashallah. He has so much in his hasanat, he has so much in his good deeds, mashallah. And I'll just add to that, Afwan, my apologies, just add to that, even though, like, particularly after 9/11, because a lot of the politics of what happened in America, so Shk Hamza Yusuf, his approach changed. He began more about dealing with the mainstream, no longer just the closed Muslim audience. So his approach changed, and people have criticized him heavily for a lot of things he says and a lot of the approaches. But nobody can ever take away from what he did in terms of setting the foundation, even though people may disagree with some things that he says, and you're perfectly entitled to do so. But he's the one who set the foundation for so much of what's going on. Allahu
Akbar. I remember, share this with you. I remember there was a discussion, when we were sitting down with certain individuals whom didn't have a grasp of a classical traditional Islam and what it meant, madhab, aqidah, and spirituality, tasawwuf. And then we'd have a very specific pattern in conversation of how you would break that down based on the hadith of Jibreel, and based on the issue of timeline and how central it was to understand that looking at everything within the context. I remember, mashallah, there's times where me as a young university student would travel. You and I would go to a certain place and sit with certain individuals, and you would break it down. And mashallah, 9 times out of 10, mashallah, people would come out. I think, yeah, okay, I've understood a lot more than what I did previously. And I remember asking this type of equation or formula in speech, where did you get it from? Because it would be the same type of thing, now and again slightly different. And you told me it was the same thing that Shk Hamza taught us, the way you explain things. And just mashallah, I have just I've used that over the years abundantly, when I've sat with individuals, working in prisons, trying to break things down. I've used that exact same conversation that lasts about an hour to an hour and a half. And just recently with the students at university, I've actually put it into a slide form over 9 lectures. It's called Simplifying the Chaos. So obviously you don't know anything about that, alhamdulillah, but it's kind of, mashallah, the inspiration goes back to you, and obviously goes back to Shk Hamza. But mashallah, that it's so amazing breaking things down, looking at things within the timeline. Mashallah, I just wanted to thank you, Jazakallah khair. The hours that I spent with you.
I want to add on to that. I haven't said that in a sense, Shk Hamza Yusuf, as Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu said, he said, "Ana abdu man allamani mas'ala." He said, I'm a slave to somebody who teaches me one thing. And mashallah, so much was taken from him. But more than that, it's that legacy that he's left behind. And he's changed a whole generation in the Western English-speaking world. And there's something powerful in that. When that was like 25, many of those listening at university now, so your early 20s, that was like 25, 30 years ago. And now he's reaping the fruits of all of that. So when we're talking about all of this, it's not even just thinking about that now, it's thinking about 25, 30 years down the line. What's the legacy that you're going to leave? He's left a legacy. Even, as you said, even if you may disagree with certain viewpoints and certain standpoints that he takes, he's left a legacy. And alhamdulillah, he's in a good place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because so much khairat, so much goodness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has caused to happen through him. So everybody should always think, when you see people like that, they've done their work, they've left their legacy. What's your legacy? And what are you planning to leave for future generations?
Before I move on to the next session or next series of questions, I just want to ask you something. Name me one thing that impressed you about him at the time.
One thing, there's too many things. I mean, one of them, from an educational, from an ilm point of view, knowledge point of view, his grasp of the Arabic language, it was so phenomenal. At 2 levels. His grasp of Arabic language is subhanallah. One, he had fluency in speech, right? You are talking to an Arab. But secondly, the intricate, because Arabic, and inshallah we hope to get onto that point, Arabic can be looked at levels. There's one which is the conversation, speaking and so on. But then there's also Arabic as a vehicle to understand the language of revelation. That's Quran and Sunnah. And the 2 different things. And that's something that's important to understand. The 2 different things. Most Arabs now, even the most educated one, couldn't break down aspects of the Quran based on the language. That's something that has to be studied as an academic pursuit. But he was absolutely phenomenal on both of them. And that increased for myself. That was pivotal, and it's important for me in terms of my journey, in terms of learning Arabic. When I see somebody like that, who's come from a similar background, English-speaking person, it's not his native language, but he's now immersed himself to the point where you couldn't tell him apart from. I remember, you all know Sheikh Muhammad Khatib, who was in the masjid and the Imam of the mosque in Ar-Rahma Mosque at that time in Liverpool. And so when he first came over, first time Shk Hamza Yusuf came to England, first time he comes in the masjid. So as the Imam of the masjid, just having a little chat with him. So I spoke to the Imam, Sheikh Muhammad Khatib, and I said, how do you find him? He said his Arabic is no different to an Arab. He said he's even got the accents. He said he's not speaking like a non-Arab speaking Arab. He's speaking as an Arab. So amongst the many things that I took from him, one of the things is Arabic. And I remember in a class that we were doing, because I've seen some of the names come on here. I've seen some of the Arabic madrasa students in here. Seen one Amin Sheikh's there and Muhammad Saad, I saw them floating around. So we were doing classes, and mashallah, the classes with Shk Hamza Yusuf, they were strange. We were meant to be studying certain books like Al-Ajrumiyya and Al-Bayquniyya. We never covered any of that. We just did 1 or 2 lines, and he's just talking about everything other than we're meant to be learning. But I asked him a question in one of the classes. I said, how would you know that you've really got a grasp of Arabic language? He said, when you dream in that language. He said, when you dream in that language, he said, you've grasped that language. Right? So things like that, they were an inspiration. Allah.
MashaAllah.